News Talk, 1130 WISN, Mark Belling, late afternoon show. I was halfway whining on yesterday's program that here I am all brilliant and creative, but I can't always act on my brilliance and creativity. We've been dogging, I think that's the right term, the apparent Republican frontrunner for Lieutenant Governor Patrick Testin. And I've said that one of the reasons that I can't bring myself to support him in the primary election is that he was one of the sponsors of a bill that just keeps coming up every 2 years, brought up by Republicans in the state legislature, and we can't seem to kill it. It's just a terrible idea. It would allow the expungement of a number of crimes committed by people after the fact. The judge wouldn't have to rule on the expungement at the time that the individual convicted. You go back 10, 20, 30, 40 years to simply erase these. And just going back to the story that we covered on Milton Childs, the lefty Milwaukee County judge, there are judges in Milwaukee and Madison and they'll expunge every request that comes to them. The defenders say, well, it's only a limited number of types of crimes. It has to be a first-time felony, and it's got to be Class H or Class I. And so what difference does that make? The point that I've made on this is that you don't need Republicans to be pathetic, soft on crime, bleeding hearts, because the lefties take care of that. We've got crime out of control in this country in areas dominated by liberals. Conservatives can be an alternative to that. But you have some of these think tank groups funded by billionaires whose staffs live out in suburbs that push idiotic ideas like this, and some members of the legislature don't have the backbone to say no to them. And they don't like it when a talk show host like me will give them heat on the other side, but how else do you counter it? So anyway, I offered my criticism of Testin, Mr. Soft on Crime. And he responded by firing off a social media thing, claiming that I'm fake news. And I was whining on yesterday's program that I got this great idea for a parody. You know, the old song by the Platters, The Great Pretender. I just kind of thought you could create a song that said that Testin is the... We could create a song, The Great Expunger?
Oh, yes, he's the great expunger. He wants to expunge all that he can. But his bill was shut down. Now he looks like a clown. That Testin, give it a rest. Oh, yes, he's the great expunger, adrift in a world of his own. He calls Mark fake news and just sounds like a goof. That Testin, you're just not cool. Too real is this feeling of make-believe. Too real when I see the records bad wants to conceive. Oh yes, he's the great expunger.
Yeah, in addition to this being kind of funny, there's a funny story about it. The first version of this that gets cut and sent to me, she's singing Steve Testin, not Pat Testin. I'm telling you, I was really tempted to go with that version. I think it's even funnier to use his wrong first name, but it was corrected with this version.
To all those around, too real is this feeling of make-believe. Too real when I see the records pad wants to conceal. Oh yes, he's the great expunger, pandering to his small crowd. Testin seems to be a rhino, you see, wearing his tusk like a crown, crying expungement to all those who around.
I think I'm going to conceal the identity of the artist who created our parody there for her own self-protection and self-preservation. Like I say, the one thing about when you get on a Republican and criticize them from the right, I'm just telling you, they squeal like stuck pigs. They're willing to take all sorts of abuse from the left, and they won't say a thing in response because they're afraid of them. But they dare to get called out for selling out and caving into a bunch of, oh, we're smarter than you, intellectual conservatives. Well, you have to understand that rehabilitation is a very important part of the criminal justice process, and all this crap that comes to people that don't have to worry about being in a neighborhood that's filled with carjackers and people who commit all the other types of crimes that, you know, a guy like Testin wants to wipe off the books. And I'm going to give you one other problem that I have with this whole thing. See, they say, well, we're doing this, but we're also past the tough on crime bills too, but there's no reason that we can't be a little bit balanced in our approach. The problem with that was there was a time in which the Republicans controlled the governor's office, the state senate, and the state assembly. It was very recent. And we could not get the state legislature to pass a simple bill that stated that if while on probation you commit another crime, that your probation would be revoked. Talk about a no-brainer. You're on probation and you commit another crime while on probation, we revoke your probation from the first crime. Very simple thing. We had Republicans in the state legislature that would not embrace it. Instead, they turn around and they want to expunge from public view a significant number of criminal convictions. Well, I don't approve of it. Some of you may be perfectly fine with it, and you can all vote for Pat Testin. Testin's people say, well, you know what? Roger Roth, the guy who's running second in the front, he's just as bad, and he may be just as bad on the issue. I can vote for Cindy Warner, who's likely to be and also ran in the race, but it's what we're stuck with. And part of the problem here is when you have a multi-candidate primary, the frontrunners are largely going to be people who come out of the state legislature. And while the Democrats in the Wisconsin legislature are terrible on crime, there are a lot of Republicans in the state legislature who are pretty poor as well. And one of them, Testin, wants to be the lieutenant governor of the state. He's got a track record here. I have given him every opportunity to vow to never pursue this stupid expungement thing again. If he wants to pursue it, he can easily run as a Democrat where his soft on crime ideology will fit in perfectly well. But I didn't want to say that. He wants to continue to push this because he wants to continue to feed at the trough of Americans for prosperity. So I'm going to offer my criticism. I think on other issues, Testin's perfectly fine. He's a good state senator. But the crime issue is dominant in this state. The Republicans want to win the governorship back. There's two issues upon which they can do it: education and crime. There's a clear differentiation between the two parties on education, and there ought to be on crime. But it gets watered down when some of these soft on crime Republicans simply will not stop pretending that there isn't a tremendous cost to society of continually letting dangerous people out.